Hey, I want to do something this morning before we get started. We have something here at Destiny Church that we call DBI. We started it a little over a year ago, Destiny Bible Institute. And we had about 12 people go through that this past year. But we had 3 that were full-time students. At Destiny Bible Institute, you can choose to go full-time or part-time. This semester, we just started a new semester. We have 13 people going through that. But this past year, we had 3 people go through every single session, every single thing. We walked through the life of Christ, New Testament survey, Old Testament survey, essentials of Christianity, and then right now we're even going through something called Understanding the Bible. And so there's 5 6-week classes throughout a year, and these people went through all of those. And we want to invite you to be a part of that. But today we want to honor those that graduated with Anthony and Carrie and Leanne. Would you guys join me on the stage? Would you give it up for those that have graduated? These guys are doing a great job. Anthony and Carrie are actually leading a financial peace university right here at the church right now. Doing a great job of that. Walking through that. Anthony serves here at the church as our head of maintenance, and they make sure this building looks good every week, and they do just a great job. But anyway, they're doing amazing, and this is Leanne. She came in, and hey, those of you that have been around here very long, you know Mike Haas, she's the one that made him normal and helped him and helped all of us. But anyway, we're so thankful for them. So, Leanne, I want to give you this certificate. Thank you so much, and we're so honored. Give it up for Leanne. Carrie, there you go. Thank you guys so much. And then Anthony. Let's give it up for them. Let's give it up for these that graduated. Thank you guys so much. You did awesome. We're so proud of you guys. You can be seated. Thank you. Makai's going to help you guys down. Look at that. Look at that. Hey, we've been in the middle of a series here at Destiny Church called The Space Between. How many of you have enjoyed this series? Anybody enjoyed this series? It's been one of my favorites. And you guys helped us write this series from the first week. You came and you pinned things to the cross. It told us what was happening in your life and things that were creating space in your life. And so we're gonna do something a little different today concerning that. But before we do, anybody in this room excited about the holidays? Anybody excited about holidays? My favorite time of year. My favorite holiday has always been Thanksgiving. I love it. I have still to this day have no clue why we can only eat turkey on 1 or 2 days a year. It seems like it should be like a once-a-month family meal. But anyway, how many of you would be honest and say you have some dysfunction in your family? Raise your hand. Look around you. Hey, here's the good thing. You're not alone. You're not alone. All of us have some dysfunction in our families. But I know sometimes at the holiday season, we get a little bit nervous about going and dealing with the dysfunction. And we're like, man, I got to put up with my crazy uncle again, my crazy aunt or whatever that might be, or I got to put up with another fight. So something we kind of started several years ago here at Destiny Church that I want to bring back and give you guys some encouragement, help you have a little fun at your holidays so you can go into, instead of having some fear, you can go into it with some excitement. And we did something several years ago called Dysfunctional Family Bingo. Any of you guys remember that? Dysfunctional Family Bingo. So what this is, it's just a typical bingo game, but you don't tell your family you're playing it, just between you and your spouse, and if you want to bring your kids in on the game, you can. But you make up your own bingo card. All right, for whatever the dysfunction is in your family. If it's great Uncle Bob got into a fight again with great Uncle Sid, you write that down. But you write down your bingo game and you just kind of make it out whatever you want. Somebody got drunk again. My aunt flirted with me again. Whatever that might be, whatever the dysfunction is. And you just mark those all out. And then you get that on your bingo card, and then when something happens, when your aunt flirts with you, you just kind of put a mark through that spot again, And when you get bingo, you don't yell at the table bingo, all right? First of all, because your family's like, what are you talking about? They're going to think you're the dysfunctional crazy one. What you do is you go onto your social media page and you just put bingo. And the entire church, when they see that, they're going to know exactly what happens. Or you can go directly to the Destiny Church Facebook page or Instagram account and you can just put bingo. And we'll all just celebrate with you and clap. So anyway, maybe that'll help you enjoy your holiday a little bit more. Hey, in this series, we've been talking about Genesis chapter 2, verse 25, where it says, Adam and Eve, it says they were naked and they felt no shame. And then we talked about Genesis chapter 3, verse 9 and 10, where it says that God went walking in the garden and couldn't find them. And he's asked them, where are you? And Adam said, we hid because we were afraid, because we were naked. What happened between Genesis 2:25 and Genesis 3:10? They were naked and felt no shame, and then in Genesis 3:10 they felt shame. What created the space? What created the distance? And that's what we've been talking about in this series. And we've looked at things such as our identity in Christ, or shame, or anxiety. We've looked at things like busyness. We've talked about several different things that create this space in our lives. But we've come to realize that Jesus bridges the gap. In Romans chapter 5, verse 16, it tells us that Adam's sin brought about condemnation. But Jesus' death, it says God's gift gives us grace and redemption through Jesus. So the space between our sin creates space. It creates condemnation. But Jesus comes to bridge that gap and get us closer to God. And that's what I hope has happened in this series. And today we're going to recap this series. And I've got some friends that are getting ready to join me on the stage. First service was extremely powerful. This is one of my favorite services, probably one of my favorite panels we've ever done. Can you help me welcome our panel to the stage? Look at Steve. Look at everybody just working today. I want to introduce everybody that's up here with me. On the end here, this is Eric French. He and his wife Amanda, part of our church. We love them. And then beside him is Rob Ashley and his wife Abby. And they just are a tremendous asset to our church. And then we have Betsy Houchin and her husband Jeremy. We love them. They're like family to us. And their daughter hangs out at our house. We're not sure if we like that or not, but we're still debating. And then Jen Buchanan and her husband Rob have been DCers for a long time and just tremendous friends of ours and their family. Can you welcome this panel to the stage? Rob, talk to me a little bit here on this series. What's been the most impactful thing for you, or your favorite thing from this series? What's been the best thing for you from this series?
That first Sunday.
Well, let's make sure that's on. Are we on there?
Nope.
Push the red button. You got a light there now? There we go.
Test. There we go.
You are.
So that first week, you're talking about that space, what's keeping us from God. And the first Sunday, went up to the cross to write some things down, needed a bigger piece of paper. But there was a couple of things of just fear, things that had been spoken over me, lies from my dad, from uncle, from an abuser, just a lot of different lies that had kept me from God. But later I really realized that it was me in this time that was causing that gap. When you kind of zoom out a little bit, you see the larger picture and you see God, and I mean, he's just stretched out. He's hanging from heaven. He's just reaching out to Adam. Just there's muscles bulging in his arm. There's veins popping. I mean, he's just doing everything he can. And then when you see Adam, he's just up there, just super casual, bro couldn't even put on boxers. Like, he's just letting it all hang out. And he's got his leg kind of bent. And he's just kind of like, yeah, like I'm kind of reaching towards you, God, but not really. And I really got convicted that had been me. Like, I had just kind of gotten in a funk where I was coming to church, I was checking a couple boxes, but I wasn't diving into the Word. I wasn't spending time like I should be. And so that was kind of the biggest thing that really struck me then. And then with Pastor Steve last weekend, just talking about 30 days left and just being like, man, like, if I'm out in 30 days, then the past couple months of an example to my kids is not someone that's really pressing into God. It's just someone who casually, just that image of just Adam just kind of like, that was me. And so I was like, man, I don't want that for my kids.
That's good.
So that was the biggest thing.
Betsy, talk to us about what's been the most impactful thing for you from this series.
I would say it was week 2 when you talked about identity issues. I've always really struggled with self-confidence. You kind of talked about the masks of, going into a room and, putting on a face of being happy or secure or strong. And, it's something that I've always just really struggled. And, when you asked me to do this, the first thought came to my mind was relating a little bit to Moses. Like, I can't, I don't speak. Please don't ask me to do this. And then I heard that voice of, who told you that? Who told you can't speak or get in front of people? And, I just, I've always often wondered why, because I didn't grow up in a family where I wasn't loved or, that anything was spoken over me to make me be, less confident. And so I think that when you did ask me to do this, and my first thought was, this is way out of my comfort zone, it
took you a little while to respond.
It really did. And, it was at that moment that it was like, when I heard that voice say, who told you can't? And then it was like, you want to be closer to me? Step out of your comfort zone. Step out of your box and start doing things that I can give you the strength and the confidence to do, and you will become closer to me.
Yeah.
So I think that really, and you don't, and I think sometimes you think you've dealt with it. You think, oh, I'm okay, or I am more confident, but as soon as you get asked to do something that's stepping out, you realize, maybe I really haven't dealt with my confident issues.
Yeah. Well, you guys you find out that when you get asked to do something or to step out of your comfort zone, in those moments, you do get closer to God. I guarantee you guys have read more and prayed more this week than you have in the previous month combined, because it's like, oh man, I'm going to be sitting at all these faces and staring at them. But anyway, well, I thought it was interesting that you talked about, I didn't have anything bad happen. I was raised in a good family, and yet you struggled with your identity. Mm-hmm. And then, Eric, I want to talk to you about your identity. You've talked to me about your identity struggles. You are going to open up here in a second, but you're a little bit opposite of Betsy. You did have things that happened to you. So I want to even speak to that before we go on, I don't think always it matters what happens to us. The enemy just is out to destroy who we are in Christ. Doesn't matter if we have great parents or we struggled in a dysfunctional family. But can you speak to that concerning the identity issues and why you struggled and what's happened in your life?
Sure. Yeah, the enemy knows how to get to us. He knows our weaknesses. And, I grew up struggling with identity because I was trying to hide all the time. I grew up with an alcoholic father, which led to divorced parents. My mom got remarried. She married a man who was extremely manipulative, even led to sexual abuse for me. And it was really hard for me to be able to know what my identity was, because I was always hiding. I was always putting on a mask, always putting something else forward. And I always thought that I was okay because I got really good at compartmentalizing, putting that in a box and hiding it far away where nobody ever saw it. And what happened was I realized that compartmentalizing is not dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I never really dealt with it. So my identity became a mask. And when I left the house at 17, got away from everything, joined the Navy, I got really good at being a sailor, as a friend of ours once used that term. And I turned to everything I could to push down pain. I turned to sex and pornography and became addicted to those things. And I thought, man, I'm not worthy of love, having a relationship. I pushed everyone away. And I thought, when I get married, somebody will love me. That'll be the time that I am finally worthy. I'm going to find somebody who loves me. The problem was, when I got married, that I never let my wife love me. I always pushed her away too. And so I never felt worthy. I kept trying to struggle and compartmentalize and put a facade that I was successful, or I was okay, I was good, and even tried to make her believe it. But slowly the addiction started to come back, and it started slowly with pornography, and then it went into infidelity. And that's when I really started to feel that separation. I felt that, yeah, you've done it now. Now you aren't worthy. You've proven that. And I I lived in that for a long time, many years. And one day I did something I not normally practiced. I fell on my face in front of God, and I prayed. And I asked him for forgiveness and repented. And felt the conviction the next day to go to my wife and ask her for the forgiveness. And I told her everything. And when I thought, she's going to hate me and leave me, she looked at me in the most loving way I've ever seen in my life. And she said, "I forgive you." And that's the first time that I saw the identity of Jesus. And through the identity of Jesus, I found my own identity.
Mm.
And since then, I've become closer to God and Jesus faster than I've ever known and more than I've ever known. And my wife and I have become closer than I could ever imagine. And our marriage is going really good. So
I really think it's interesting. I'd never heard it said that way until the first time you told me that you found forgiveness from your wife was the first time you kind of felt forgiveness from God, and you felt identity from God through your wife. That was interesting to me, is because I never really thought of it that way or heard it that way. But when you said that, and even when you said it first service, it really made me think. Oftentimes we are the only Jesus that people will ever see. Some of you're the only Jesus. Because here's the deal: Jesus right now is in this room. His presence is here. He's sitting right beside you. I mean, he's in the room, but you can't see him. But you can see the person sitting beside you. And for some people in your life, a child, a spouse, a parent, a friend, a coworker, you're the only Jesus. Your life was changed because your wife gave you grace. And it shaped your identity through a human. And just think of that, how your life can shape somebody else's life. Your forgiveness, your grace, your mercy, your love, your attitude can impact somebody else. And I also thought it was interesting, and I want to throw this question kind of at all you guys. It's, not one that we put in our notes, but you talked there a little bit. You talked about how it started small. It started with pornography. You didn't just wake up one day and say, "You know what? I'm going to cheat on my wife today." It didn't just start there. It started small. You could probably trace it back to the things that even happened to you as a child that you never dealt with. And I think that's what happens for a lot of us, is we don't deal with things that happen in our life. We bury them. I'd say many of you in this room, even throughout this series, are still sitting there with things that are buried inside of you. And a friend of mine who you'll hear from here in a few weeks says, what we do is oftentimes we cut off the top of it, but we never deal with the root. We cut off the tree, and we claim, "Hey, I'm good. I'm married. I'm going to be healthy." And then we're like, "Uh-oh, I never dealt with it." So it starts small. Can you guys, any of you, speak to that a little bit, how some things maybe in your life maybe started small and got big? And it's not even just talking about sexual issues, just fear, doubt, whatever it might be. Can any of you speak to that a little bit? Anybody want to throw a thought?
Somebody, when you start with any of those, just that fear, that doubt, any of those lies from the enemy can just get a hold of you. And it's just kind of, we all have the illusion of control until we realize we don't have control.
Yeah.
Chris Ritchie was just saying that to me during the services. And with myself, there was just lies that I believed from the enemy. And, I was comparing myself to others and just a lot of different things that just led to some depression. And I didn't wake up just one day, all of a sudden, "Hey, I'm going to cause this car accident and try to kill myself." It was months and months of comparing myself and accepting lies from the enemy that got me to that place.
That's a big thing. How many lies have we accepted that shape our identity? So many of us, we buy into lies. And that's what causes us to sit there, to stand there, to say, "This is what I am. I'm not worthy of living. I'm not worthy of love," because of a lie that the enemy tells us. Let me just tell you today, the enemy wants to destroy you. He's out to take your identity. I think the greatest thing he wants to wrestle with is your identity. Jen, you talked to me, you sent me a text about anxiety. And I'd say a lot of us in this room struggle with anxiety. Anxiety robs us of so many things. can you speak to them, you know, and I really want you to even speak to moms. You're a stay-at-home mom. That does not mean she doesn't work. I discovered that years ago with my own wife. Stay-at-home moms probably work more than go-to-work moms, you know. But can you speak, especially to women, but really to a lot of the what-ifs and the games we play in our mind, start buying into lies? Can you speak to anxiety and what that does to you?
Yeah. So for me, anxiety steals my security. And when I think of the word secure, I think I can breathe.
Yeah.
Like it's breath, it's calming, it's a peace. Anxiety really attacks me the most when we are at the lake, and we're huge lake people. We're there all summer long, and it gets me the most whenever we have a baby, an infant toddler who is in this big, bulky life jacket because they're still too small to get into the more better life jackets, trying to toddler around on a dock in open water. Like, it's terrifying for me. So, but then on a daily basis, I struggle with, or I start worrying about things like, what are my girls learning in school? And how and by whom are they being influenced in school? You know, I worry if I could be a better wife, a better mother, a better daughter, a better friend. You know, we all have those daily struggles or those daily anxieties that we struggle with. And I feel like anxiety is a popular topic. Mm-hmm. I mean, even here on my journal, it says, pray more, worry less. I feel like it's become kind of something that people are talking about more, and I think that's great because I don't think people talked about it enough before.
Yeah.
Over the summer, a group of girlfriends and I read a book by Max Lucado called Anxious for Nothing. And at the very beginning of this book, I mean, in the very first chapter, he says, the presence of anxiety is unavoidable. It will be there. The anxiety is unavoidable, but the prison of anxiety is optional. Mm. And I felt like I was in that prison. And until I read that, I didn't realize that I had put myself in that prison. It was me. It was choices that I had made. And I was in a state where I was unable to catch my breath. I was just constantly out of breath. So the question I kind of asked myself while I was doing the study was, how do I change this? How do I fix this? Because when you're in that tunnel of worry, you don't see anything else that's going on. Yeah. You are so focused on what you're worried about, you don't see what else is around you. So I needed some sort of focus. And for me, I put checks into my life, moments where I could check myself. And this looks like, for me, it may look different for other people, but it's journaling. I've never been someone to write down my feelings or prayers or anything like that. And in 2016, I did a New Year's resolution to journal for an entire year. And I did it. I made an entire year. But then towards the beginning of 2018, I kind of got away from it. Busyness, which I'll talk about later, got in the way. We were building a house. I had all these other things going on where I didn't spend that time journaling. And since the summer when I did the book, the Anxious for Nothing book, for me, that is when my anxiety changed. Putting pen to paper was like physically turning my worries over to God. And I can't explain it because if you don't understand, you just have to try it. You just have to try and write it down, and you will physically turn it over to God. My MOPS group, this last couple weeks, we did a video by Mary Messina, and she talked about worry. And she left us with a great challenge. She calls it the 14-day challenge. And we partnered up with people we grouped up, and we send a text message out to everyone in our group every evening of 3 things we are grateful for that day. Mm. And they do not have to be life-changing things, like, I got a shower in today. Like, I am grateful for something like that. And I can't tell you how refreshing it is to get those messages from those women about things that they are grateful for. And I can feel like I can breathe again. Like,
Yeah.
it's refreshing. I have that security back. And I feel like it's so easy for anxiety to take control. It's really easy. It just washes over us. But it takes work to overcome it. And if this is an area that you are really struggling with, if anxiety is taking over your life and you feel like you are in that prison, I really encourage you to try this. Try journaling about it. Try being grateful for 3 things every day and see how that will impact your life.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about there, Jen, and it just reminded me of Philippians 4. We talk about it in our series, be anxious for nothing, but in all things. And so I thought it was interesting, even as you're talking there, about journaling. So write it down. When I go into prayer, oftentimes, I don't know if any of you guys are like me, the moment I decide I want to spend time with God, I'm reminded of every to-do list. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? It's like I get into prayer, and Tasha asked me to do something a month ago, and I haven't thought of it since the day. I get into prayer, I'm like, ooh, I got to go hang this or do this. And so what I started having to do for myself is I have to write things down. So it's kind of that same idea of putting it on paper. Okay, I want to get rid of that negative thought. Hey, this is what I'm struggling with. I write my prayers a lot. God, here's where I am. And I'll put those on paper. But then Philippians, I think you flipped it with these encouraging texts you guys are getting. Think about good things. So I'm throwing this bad thing away. Tasha started doing this. She'll journal, and then she'll put down negative things, and then she burns it. It's like, all right, I'm putting it on paper. Now I'm done with it. Now I'm going to think about you. I'm going to focus on how you're good. Even a small thing, I got in a shower today, And those you stay-at-home moms with 3 or 4 kids, or some of you more, it's like you understand exactly what she's talking about. But I want to encourage you, listen to even what they're talking about, the things they've walked through, and how she has dealt with anxiety. She talked about how anxiety kind of, when she feels secure, I can breathe again. I want you to think about that. How many of you, the entire time you've been sitting here, have thought about breathing? None of you have thought, God, take my next breath again. Breathe again. Breathe again. You don't think about breathing until you can't breathe. And that's what anxiety does. Anxiety robs you of your breath. It robs you of your joy. A simple thing that God created you to do without thinking, breathing. The enemy wants to rob you of that. Why? Ultimately, he wants to destroy you. He wants you dead. Why? Because you're made in the image and the likeness of God. Genesis chapter 1 tells us that. That's why I think he comes at our identity. It's because we're made in the image of God, and he doesn't want us to know, if I realize who I am in Christ, I can change the world. But then, so he'd realize, hey, I can't destroy them. I can't kill them all just right away, but I'm going to rob their breath, so that then she is struggling. She can't breathe. She's playing the what-if game and struggling with that. Betsy, you play the what-if game. You struggle with that. You've told us. How many of you in the room have the Life 360 app on your phone as parents? Any of you parents? If you don't, it's a great little tool. Check it out, Life 360. You can see where your kids are at all times. It's just a great app. If you have kids that drive, it's awesome. But anyway, but you've told us, hey, I stalk my kids. And it's comical a little bit. But can you really speak to, you had a moment where you couldn't see one of your kids on there, and how your mind spiraled.
Yeah, so the Life 360 app, I would encourage everybody to get it. But it is good. It can be good, but it can also be not good, because it does consume me at times. I'll go on there just to see where they're at. And, my kids are older, 21, 19, and 17. So, of course, they ask, why do we have to have this? But as long as I'm paying the cell phone bill, you're going to have it, and I'm going to know where you're at. Anyways, there was a particular weekend just a couple weeks ago where I was actually in St. Louis at a Joyce Meyer conference, and I noticed that Abby was in a very interesting spot. And usually she will tell me, where she's at. And it looked like she was downtown Springfield in a hotel. And I thought, okay, this is strange. Usually she'll let me know. And so it's interesting how your mind can take over and start, wandering and thinking, oh my gosh, something's happened to her. Somebody's got, has taken her and taken her to a place. And And so I'm trying to text her, trying to call her. She's not answering. I get a hold of my mom. And at this point in time, I'm in tears because my mind has taken me so far away from, okay, she's okay, to, oh my gosh, she's in danger. Like, we got to get to her. And I'm crying. And I'm thinking to myself, here I am at a conference. The enemy's wanting to steal the joy and everything that I'm, being fed at that particular time to, wondering where my daughter is.
Yeah.
And finally she got a hold of it. She had ended up staying at a friend's it was not a hotel. She was in an apartment with a friend that she was studying with. But, it's interesting how, like I said, our mind can go to the worst of the worst. Instead of realizing that these are God's children, that He has given me, and I've done the best that I can with them, and that I have to daily entrust them to Him, and know that He is watching over them and protecting them, and that I don't have to be anxious and worry. Just little kids to big kids, it steals our joy, and it really robs us of being able to take those breaths and know that, it's out of our control and that we just have to give them over to God.
That's really good that you talk about that because, Tasha and I, we have 4 kids and, all the way from 19 to 4. And you think about entrusting your kids to God. Why is it that we feel like we can do a better job? You know what I mean? How many, you know what I'm talking about? We feel like I can do a better job than God. At the end of the day, all we can do as parents is teach our kids morals, teach them boundaries, teach them to be wise. And then number 1, ultimately we've got to trust God. God, I'm going to trust that you've planted this seed in there somewhere, and it's going to blossom, it's going to bloom. But God, most importantly, I'm going to trust that you're going to keep them safe. But then I'm going to have to trust my kids. At the end of the day, that's all we can do. And the enemy wants to cause us to worry. Psalms chapter 37:8 tells us, don't fret, it only causes harm. I want you to speak to this for a minute. Why do you think, and if any of you have anything you want to chime in here, because I feel like anxiety is something, even in this crowd today, that some of them are struggling with. Why do you think it's easier to be anxious than it is to trust God? Think about that. He says, don't be anxious for anything. And he says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Why is it easier to worry than it is to trust God?
Yeah, personally, it's been, when you go through the bad health report, when you go through the unemployment, when you go through those negative situations, trusting God, you have to be like, well, God, you're in this. Mm-hmm. You knew this was going to happen. And so it's a lack of trust that causes us to worry and not trust the promises of God. I had a couple years ago, I worked for the federal government, had a good job. Then I felt called to work for this nonprofit out west, and went out there, and very quickly it was falling apart. And they were playing a song one time talking about God never failed, never let us down. And I almost had an anxiety attack then because I was like, well, God, you've done that for me before. I felt like the Israelites. Like, I've seen all these promises, and I see the end. I see the game plan, see the path. But right now, I feel like you're going to let me down. Mm-hmm. And so it's that lack of trust in the midst of it. And, but it could be so much more freeing when we just trust God. And we started coming to Destiny Church Christmas time last year, and they were doing you were doing the perfect gift offering. And I was like, man, that's awesome, getting some shoes for some kids and some other things. We'll do that. Once I'm not unemployed, then we can actually do that. And God wouldn't get off my back, and so to kind of, little distraction, I filled out a prayer card for a job. And so doing that, but he still wouldn't get off my back about this. And so finally, I asked my wife, and she's like, yeah, go ahead and give. And I'm like, that's the wrong answer. So I was very spiritual, took the money and angrily shoved it in an envelope and threw it in the offering. And so it's Christmas time. We're flying down to Florida because it's cheap flights on Allegiant. But Allegiant, though, they don't like that I don't pay to pick our own seats. So they put me and the kids together, 2 toddlers, and they'll throw my wife in the back of the plane. It's like a vacation for her already. I'm like, no, we need her right here. I can be in the back.
I'm going to be real anxious if you don't help.
Another anxiety attack on this flight. But yeah, so the last minute changed to put her seat right next to us, and then there's nobody supposed to sit next to me, and this lady comes and she sits down, and the short recap of it is she's the regional director for this international company, and after a short period of conversation, she's like, so what are you doing? I was like, I don't do nothing. I'm unemployed. I'm not going to see her again, I just shoot it straight with her. And she's like, well, I'm looking for an operations manager. Are you interested? And I'm like, what? After that story? But so we start talking. I didn't realize my interview was there on the plane. And we both come back on the same flight. I go in for what I thought was my interview, and it wasn't. She's like, okay, here's your company phone, here's your company computer, and here's the keys to your company car. I'll see you on Monday. And I'm like, what? And so, man, if I had just trusted God during that whole process, if I had just been like, all right, God, this is your money. Like, when I was giving, too, the scripture that it's God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills came to my mind. And I was like, that's great, but I don't have a cattle or a hill or nothing. And if I had just trusted God in that process, it could have been so much more freeing that he's had me before, he's got me in the future, and right now, no matter what my spouse is saying to me right now, no matter what the doctors are saying, no matter what the bank account says or doesn't say, that he's still faithful.
One of the big things you talked about there that really hit me as you said it, trust is important, but there's got to be obedience with trust, And so I think now your identity is being shaped. We've had multiple conversations of what God's been doing in your life in the past year. You came here from being and serving in nonprofit ministry type things. You knew God. You had a relationship with God. But I think what God's been doing in you is shaping your identity because he has big plans for you. He has big plans for every single one of you on the stage. Just think, though, if you hadn't have trusted and been obedient, even in frustration, okay, God, here's the money, trust doesn't always mean we're like, okay, God, I completely agree with you. Sometimes it's just, okay, I'm going to take this step of faith, even though I think it's going to fail. But hey, you're bigger, and I'm going to do that. And that's what you did. I think about you. Would you be sitting in the seat you are today, having your life shaped if you hadn't put that money in there? No, it's trust and obedience, and because of that, your identity is being shaped even today. That's awesome. Eric, I want to ask you a question. One of the big things that this series really was shaped on, and I struggle with this, I struggle with shame. I personally have struggled with shame. I think a lot of us probably have. Shame is a major ploy of the enemy. Shame makes us, somebody in the room, the Lord's saying, somebody walked in this room today not feeling like you're worthy to sit in this room. I've made too many mistakes. I've failed too many times. Shame makes us feel unworthy. Shame made Adam and Eve run and hide from God when God just wanted to be with them, even in their sin. How can I know that? Well, because Scripture says, even while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Yet shame pushes us away from God. Shame makes us run and hide. But the power of Jesus, the gift of God gives us grace. We don't have to run and hide. And Eric, you've struggled with shame. Can you speak to that? I want you to speak. You had a real powerful moment. I can't remember if it was the first Sunday of this series or the second Sunday where you had a real powerful moment. And you were even walking through some identity and some shame issues. Can you speak to that today?
Yeah. So you had said, whatever happens to you or happened to you is not your fault. And the sexual abuse was the big one that I struggled with. And even though conceptually I can say it wasn't my fault, I know that. But it was hard to believe in here. It was hard to deal with, and that hit me. I've dealt with that shame for a long time. Through that shame, I pushed myself away from God. And I talked about it earlier, that I pushed away from every relationship. And so the deeper in sin that I got, the further I felt from God. And I tried. I'd go to church and put on the mask, but I never felt worthy of being there. I never felt like I was supposed to be in that seat. And the enemy would attack me every time, and we wouldn't go back. I always blamed it on the church. I wasn't being fed. The pastor wasn't good, or the congregation wasn't friendly enough. And it was my shame.
Huh.
It was my shame that kept me from God.
That's good.
You're as far from God as you want to be.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. the moment I told my wife and confessed to God, the shame went away from me very quickly. I felt free. I felt like a weight was lifted. The enemy tried to attack me again because obviously there was hurt there. There still is for my wife. And anytime that I saw her sad or cry or need alone time, I did that to her. She wouldn't feel that if I didn't cause that. And so he would attack me again and say, see what you did?
Wow.
And that's shame. And that pushes you away from God. But quickly now that I know who Jesus is, I can say no. There's hurt there, and we're going to deal with that. But we're working together.
That's good. Any of you, this isn't one of the questions, but any of you struggled with shame? Sitting here, any of you struggled with shame? And if so, how's that impacted you?
You know, I think I have struggled with shame a little bit just from maybe things that I did, you know, in my teenage years and, you know, even getting older, especially knowing better, you know. I mean, I have a very different story than his as far as, you know, I felt like I was always loved, but things that I allowed myself to do, I think has caused me to feel that shame and feel like I'm not good enough, or what would people think of me if they truly knew, you know, all of the things that I've done, or the things that I've encountered, you know. So and honestly, I think through this series has kind of helped bring that to light to me. You know, I don't know that I ever really knew that I had shame, but, you know, after you asking us to do this and really studying and getting into God's Word, I think I really do have some shame, and that's what's maybe caused my low self-confidence and, you know, just not feeling like I'm worthy.
Yeah. You know what shame does? Shame, as you were talking there, made me even think shame and anxiety sometimes play the same game, the what if game. What if they knew what I've done? What if anxiety? They both play this game with us. What if? And that's what the enemy is trying to do to you. What if? Why? Because he's trying to get you to question the promises of God. That's what this whole series is about, is we're questioning the identity of God. We're struggling with that. What if? Shame. What if? Anxiety. What if? Identity in Christ. So just all these things. Last question I want to ask, Jen, I want to throw it at you. Last week, Pastor Steve did a great job talking about busyness, and I would say probably everybody in this room struggles with busyness. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a dad, or you work 2 jobs or 3 jobs or one, whatever, all of us struggle with busyness. I think it's ultimately a trick from the enemy to make us busy. Busyness separates us from God. Busyness creates space. Can you speak to busyness? And then some of the things you're doing to combat busyness in your own life.
Yeah, my husband jokes that I am the busiest person he knows without a job. But I feel like that's true. I mean, I just fill my plate with so much stuff. I'm running after the kids. I've got all these things going on. And, you know, they're positive things. They're good things. Like, I'm leading a MOPS group, and that takes a lot of time, but it's a passion of mine. And so I think we can fill our plates with positive things, and they're good, but it is still filling our plates. And I also believe that busyness leads to anxiety, and it creates that out-of-breath feeling where we've got so much going on that now we have anxiety about how we're going to get it all done, and it puts us back in that prison of anxiety again. And I like the visual example that Pastor Steve talked about, just with the big rocks in the one jar and the smaller rocks in the other jar. And I feel like we're really out of balance with that. And most people live moment to moment, and in that moment, you're trying to make the best decision you can for that moment, and you're not looking at how that one decision is going to affect where those big rocks fall in your jar of life. And our family and our big rocks, the things that are most important to us, get the leftovers of us, and, you know, they are hurting because of that. That's how I felt. I felt like, you know, my priorities were were wrong, and I was filling up, my jar had 1,000,000 of those smaller rocks in it. And the distance between God and myself was buried so far underneath all this other stuff I had to do that I couldn't even clearly define where it was. So for me, I needed order in my life, and order looks like time management. And this is what has helped me personally in my life create that order. So I do this 4 different ways. And the first one and foremost is have that daily quiet time with the Lord first thing in the morning before I get out of bed. The second thing I do is, again, journaling, and I talked about it earlier, but for me, again, it is physically turning something over to the Lord is journaling. The third thing I do is I make checklists and to-do lists. Like I have a daily cleaning schedule, and on Mondays I know that I have to mop the tiles and clean the showers and the tubs and do the laundry. And for my MOPS group, I have a checklist of things I need to do, and those girls know that if it's not written down on my to-do list, it will not get done. Yeah. And I do like a daily meal plan for 2 weeks. I sit down and I write out every single meal for 2 weeks. And it takes time, yes. Again, we're adding one more thing to do in our already busy days. But I can tell you that just being able to sit down and do that creates so much more order in your life. It has in mine. And the fourth and the last thing that I do is I limit or completely get rid of social media and Facebook and anything else that you use. You did a sermon on this back at the beginning of September. So it's almost been 3 months now that I've been put this into practice, where I have not used Facebook or social media on a daily basis, if at all. And for me, it's not necessarily like a privacy thing. Like, I get that this is a hot topic for people in social media, but for me, it's time management. Like, I will pick up my phone and get on Facebook and just be scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and I look over and an hour has gone by, where in my busy chaos of life, I've wasted that hour. And my friends know now that I'm not on Facebook, so they will text me pictures or of fun things their kids are doing, or text me about what's going on. And I actually have a conversation with them. Like, instead of just scrolling through and liking, double-clicking, like hearting it, or laughing at an image or something like that, I am building these relationships with my friends more and talking to them instead of just liking or loving something on social media. And I feel like busyness does create so much distance between us and God. And to bring that closer and have more clarity, we need to have order in our lives.
Yeah, that's good. So busyness, even here in you, doesn't only create space between you and God, but you're even just choosing what you've done with social media has brought you even closer to friends. Oh, yeah. You know, busyness creates distance between us and God, but I think one of the things busyness does is creates busyness between us and people, and God brings people in our lives to help us figure out our identity. You know, and so he's just trying to isolate us. He's always trying to isolate us. That's what shame does, isolates. He's always trying to get us out there on our own, whatever he can, to create space. You guys have done a great job. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for this team. Didn't they do great today? Thank you, guys.